The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 20312 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on changes to business. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press their request to speak button now. And I call on Graham Day to move the motion.
I move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion. Therefore, the question is that motion 20312 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is topical questions. At question number 1, I call Sandesh Gulhani.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the talks with BMA representatives regarding the planned resident doctor strike due to begin next week.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, Happy New Year to you, to colleagues and to other staff. I held further constructive discussions with the BMA Resident Doctor Committee yesterday and I've just left further discussions this afternoon in order to attend to parliamentary responsibilities. These discussions are ongoing and we hope to agree a resolution to avoid industrial action, which is in no one's interest, least of all patients.
Sandesh Gulhani.
Declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP and a declaration of interest as a BMA member. November was the worst on record for 4-hour A&E waits. The 62-day cancer treatment target has not been met in over a decade and Scots struggle to even get an appointment with their local GP. When the SNP are confronted with failures of their own making, they try to doctor the figures in their favour. Their utter incompetence has left staff picking up the pieces. But with an almost unprecedented flu season, it feels irresponsible for resident doctors to strike next week, and I would encourage them to think again. It is critical that the Scottish Government stops these strikes from happening. If they go ahead, the needless loss of life will rest squarely on the shoulders of Neil Gray and John Swinney. If Neil Gray capitulates to the demands, can I ask where in the budget will he get the money from? And can I also ask what other offers are being made that aren't monetary?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. There are a few areas to unpick there in Sandesh Gulhani's question. First of all, the NHS is demonstrably turning a corner. We can see that in the waiting times data that's been published today, showing that for the 6th month in a row, waiting times over a year have reduced and reduced substantially. And that is down to the efforts of staff and the investment that's been given by government in order to focus on that. In terms of where we are in negotiations, I think it's important to respect the confidentiality of those discussions. But on the one hand, Sandesh Gulhani tells me to resolve it, and on the other hand tells me not to capitulate. So this is where the art of negotiation and compromise come in order to find a way through that is suitable to patients, that is suitable to resident doctors, that is affordable and fair across public sector pay policy.
Sandesh Gulhani.
Notice that Neil Gray didn't answer the question. So the SNP government have lost the trust of public sector workers, as demonstrated by the fudge deal with nurses. The RCN accused Neil Gray of reneging on his promises. And therefore, how can anyone possibly trust the word of this Cabinet Secretary? The broken trust in the Cabinet Secretary is going to directly impact patients like William McLaughlin, who wrote to me about seeing 12 ambulances parked outside A&E with patients in them and described the University Hospital Wishaw as under siege. And this is the reality of SNP incompetence. The SNP have repeatedly taken credit for Scotland so far avoiding NHS strikes. So if these strikes are to go ahead, will Neil Gray accept responsibility for this failure and resign?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the pressures that there are in our health and social care services at this time of year. That's why I visited Monklands Hospital on Christmas Eve to thank staff for the incredible efforts that they are deploying. That's why the First Minister had engagements at Glasgow Royal Infirmary and at the Children's Hospital, Royal Children's Hospital of Glasgow, in order to ensure that we were confident and assured as to the work that's been done across NHS boards to respond to winter pressures that are in the system. I recognise the challenges that Sandesh Gulhani has set out in terms of Worcester General Hospital. I understand that. That's why we're working with boards in order to see a whole system response to ensure that we are alleviating pressure. I won't comment or provide a narration in terms of the ongoing negotiations with resident doctors. I want to respect the confidentiality of those negotiations, but I am seeking to find compromise with our resident doctor colleagues. colleagues. I respect their right to strike. I respect their right to ballot their members. Of course I do. But I agree with them that industrial action will not be in anyone's interest. It will cause substantial disruption, and I've ensured that our boards are as prepared as they possibly can be for that industrial action should it take place next week.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome that resident doctors' pay in Scotland will have increased by 35% by 2027 under the current pay offer. I want to thank everyone for working in our health service for everything they do, especially over the recent festive period. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that industrial action will probably not be the best way to benefit anyone? And can he advise how this action could impact on patient care and working conditions for other NHS staff?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I thank Emma Harper for putting on the record the pay offer that has been on the table for some time that confirms the fact that the Government has respected the 2023 pay deal in terms of making substantial progress on pay restoration and increasing pay, as this pay award would do over the coming 2 years, would see a cumulative pay increase to resident doctors of 35%, which is substantial progress in terms of getting to pay restoration. I reiterate to Emma Harper, as I did to Sanders Colhani, that industrial action will bring no benefit to anyone, least of all our patients. NHS boards are planning for strike action and seeking to ensure that any disruption is minimal. But strike action will lead to some cancellations of appointments, as staff have to ensure acute and urgent care is protected. So I do ask, as I have repeated to do, the BMA to reconsider this so that we can collectively continue to improve the experience of our patients.
Keith Bailey.
Can I also, Presiding Officer, wish everybody in the Parliament a Happy New Year and say as gently as I can to the Health Secretary that former SNP Health Secretary Alex Neil was scathing in his comments about the government turning a corner on the NHS, describing that as rubbish. But turning to the resident doctors' strike, which is scheduled to start in 1 week on the 13th of January, yet in one of Scotland's largest health boards, NHS Lothian, staff are still waiting to hear what contingency arrangements will be put in place. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what arrangements are being made to ensure patients can still access healthcare in the event that the strikes go ahead?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Jackie Bailey for her question. We have been working from the moment that the ballot for industrial action was called to ensure that our boards are as prepared as possible, and we do have contingency arrangements in place. Some elements of that will require still to be finalised, but I understand from meeting with employer representatives, as I did as part of the discussions I had earlier this afternoon, that those preparations are well in advance. There is no avoiding the fact that there will be disruption should the industrial action go ahead next week, a point that I have made to our resident doctor colleagues, and that has the potential to bring about harm, for which I know that they do not wish that to happen. I certainly do not, and I'm doing everything possible to try to find, through compromise and negotiation, a route through that avoids industrial action next week.
Thank you. Question number 2, Jackie Dunbar.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of the recent snow and cold weather in Scotland.
First Minister.
So let me begin by wishing you and colleagues a Happy New Year. The Scottish Government Resilience Room SCORE has been active since Friday the 2nd of January, and our liaison officers have been working alongside frontline responders, local authorities and other partners to support their work. Ministers have been fully engaged in addressing the impacts of the heavy snowfall on transport, health and social care, along with education and preparations for the current amber and yellow warnings in place for snow and ice. A further ministerial score will take place later this afternoon. Extensive information has been shared with the public by relevant partners throughout this period. I would like to commend staff across our frontline agencies, as well as voluntary organisations and members of the public who have stepped forward to support their communities, and would urge anyone in an affected area to follow the advice on staying safe.
Jackie Dunbar.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. The snow has had the anticipated impact across the country, with Aberdeenshire, Orkney and Shetland councils all announcing that schools would still remain closed today after hundreds of nationwide closures yesterday and widespread travel disruption. Can I ask what the government's advice is to communities across Scotland, including in my own constituency, on how they should stay safe and ensure that they are prepared for such weather?
First Minister.
President Officer, I recognise and acknowledge the significance of the impact across the north east of Scotland, the Highlands and the Islands. The Scottish Government's Ready Scotland website contains a host of information on how people can prepare and work together to help others when we face conditions such as those that we are experiencing this week in those parts of Scotland. This includes advice on trusted sources of information, what materials to have at home and how to support additional help, especially from utility companies and local authorities if needed, and how to stay safe in the extreme weather that has been experienced in those areas of Scotland.
Jackie Dunbar.
The early days of 2026 have seen heavy snowfall across parts of the country, and we should think of the contribution of those who work night and day and go out in the worst of the weather to clear the roads and lay grit, whether that's Bare Scotland on trunk roads or our local authority workers. And I join the First Minister in acknowledging and thanking those folks for their contributions. But will he also join me in saying thank you to all the volunteers that are out there, whether that be a neighbour chapping on a door to make sure that their next door neighbour's okay, or just digging out their little wee bit in the pathway as well?
First Minister.
I associate myself entirely with the comments of Jackie Dunbar. Our frontline workers have worked extremely hard to make sure that services could be restored and access could be restored as quickly as possible. The latest updates are that good progress has been made on the restoration of the transport network. The trunk road network is all functioning. There is still some clearing being undertaken on the rail network, with particularly acute challenges in the far north and on the Kyle line. So I pay tribute to everybody who has made their contribution. We've also been greatly assisted by members of the farming community and others in rural Scotland who have used their own equipment to try to help to clear routes to assist the public authorities in their efforts, and I pay the warmest tribute to everybody who's made that contribution to do so.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The community response to weather, which has today been declared a major incident, has been admirable and extraordinary, unlike the government's absence, inaction and lack of communication, which has been appalling. First Minister, will Andrew Bowie MP's call for immediate mobilisation of all resources be agreed to? And what discussions has the First Minister had with Aberdeen and Shire councils to offer help in the face of brutal cuts which have limited council resources?
First Minister.
First thing I want to say to Mr Kerr is that there's been full engagement with public authorities on all of these issues, as there is on every occasion. There has also been very active communication on this issue by ministers and by those who act on our behalf. There was a change to the weather warnings very late last night by the Met Office. The Transport Secretary was communicating about that very late last night to ensure that members of the public were aware of the change in the warning, which was escalated to an amber warning very late last night. And I can assure Mr Kerr and also Mr Bowie, who has written to me, that all resources are mobilised to help the situation. We are working closely with Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council, and if there is any assistance that is required by these authorities, the Government will be happy to take forward that work, and that's, of course, what our liaison officers are doing on a constant basis.
Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Murray has seen a significant volume of snow, and schools have been now closed for a second day, and I see this as a parent of two boys who have been unable to get to school and nursery. What support will the First Minister and the Scottish Government be providing if this goes on for a prolonged period and pupils can't get into school to learn at the start of the new term? And the First Minister will be aware of the commitment he gave in 2021 as Education Secretary, where he said, and I quote, "The SNP will roll out a new programme to deliver into the hands of every school child in Scotland a laptop, Chromebook or tablet to use in school or at home." Does the First Minister know how many children stranded, unable to get into school, are using the laptops he promised them, or was this a broken promise and they don't have these laptops to learn from home?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, local authorities are, as Mr Ross will know, responsible for the delivery of education in their localities, so the whole process of online learning is properly statutorily delivered by local authorities. So I know that Murray Council will be attentive to the delivery of distance learning when these occasions occur. Indeed, I am very familiar with the mechanisms which I put in place as Education Secretary to create the eSchool, which is a digital learning platform that provides assistance to individuals in such circumstances and on many other occasions to enhance their educational contribution. And all of those resources are available to pupils the length and breadth of the country.
Question number 3, Katie Clark.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how it plans to address CalMac's ferry repair and maintenance costs in light of reports that these costs have doubled over the past 2 years.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
Annual overhauls, regular maintenance and vessel repairs are required to achieve safety standards for carrying passengers and goods to and from our islands. In recent years, we have been investing additional sums to help maintain fleet reliability and resilience, while we continue delivery of the 13 new vessels currently on order for CalMac routes. As part of the Clyde and Hebrides Ferry Service 3 contract arrangements, vessels will be subject to an increased programme of regular maintenance out with the annual overhaul schedule in order to reduce unplanned disruption and overhaul overruns. CalMac are in the early stages of considering and delivering this revised approach and will be engaging with communities in the coming months and weeks.
Katie Clark.
It is reported that over the last 11 years, more than £260 million has been spent on repairs. The bill was £50.1 million in 2024-2025, compared with £25 million 2 years earlier. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with campaigners that costs are out of control?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the member will be aware that annual overhauls are mandatory. These costs include a legally required period when every vessel must be taken off service for annual maintenance and overhaul. Now, there are issues in terms of inflation over this period, but she'll also be aware of the Caledonian Isles and its work continued for a considerable amount of time, and will have particularly increased those funds in that last year. The costs and scope for these are planned well in advance in terms of the annual overhauls, the recertification of the vessels in line with statutory regulations, and sometimes that does include complex work which does costs, such as overhauling propulsion units or engines and sourcing spare parts to minimise disruption to lifeline services. So if I can emphasise that it's not just about repairs, this is about statutory annual overhauls, and particularly for the year that she's referring to, the Caledonian Isles will have been a substantial part of that, as it had a very extended period following its annual overhaul.
Katie Clark.
The increase in costs is clearly a result of the failure of the Scottish Government to order new vessels over many years and the ageing fleet. Given the delays to the Glen Rosa and the 2 Turkish vessels which have been ordered coming into service, and the number of vessels which keep being taken out of commission for repairs, how can CalMac realistically be expected to plan its annual deployment timetable with any degree of confidence?
Cabinet Secretary.
So management across the fleet, and particularly in periods of overhaul, which we are now in, can be quite complex. I would say that she needs to differentiate between some of the costs and maintenance with repairs. 50% of repairs are completed within 4 hours. Now, that can still cause disruption. But in terms of maintaining our fleet, we want to be proactive going forward with the new contract to ensure that with regular maintenance taking place, not just at a time of annual overhaul, but throughout the period, that would minimise disruption going forward. And obviously, with 13 new vessels coming into the fleet, that will address some of the issues that she understandably has addressed.
Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Having a resilient CalMac fleet means ensuring new vessels are delivered on time. And despite the First Minister's reassurance that the MV Glen Rosa would be setting sail before May's election, before Christmas we heard the dreadful news that this lifeline vessel will not be delivered until the end of this year. The blame for this national scandal lies squarely with SNP ministers. So can the Cabinet Secretary outline what additional costs will be incurred by this delay, where the money will come from, and what actions are ministers undertaking to ensure this vessel is finally delivered?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the statement about the time period for the Glen Rosa was made to Parliament in the regular updates that were made at the end of December. I would refer the member to that. What I think is really important is the service that is provided to the people of Arran in particular. Obviously, we are in our annual overhaul period where vessels are out being repaired, etc., and having that annual maintenance and that investment provision. But until such times as we have the Glen Rosa, I've been quite clear that I want to see a two-harbour operation, so both Troon and Ardrossan, a caveat being obviously we're in the annual winter overhaul period. And I think that's really important, not just for the people of Arran, but also for the communities of Ardrossan.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I wish the Chamber a Happy New Year? But also thank the CalMac staff that have kept Irelanders moving in very difficult conditions over the last few weeks. But I do know that the news about the Glen Rosa was snuck out to Parliament, the Cabinet Secretary said in the usual way, as traditionally has become a habit for this government, the minute we all rose for recess. The reality is, on the Gurk to Dunoon route, there have been 6,000 technical cancellations, not weather-related, technical, in the last 3 years. Nearly 800 on the Arran route alone. That's 16,000 technical cancellations in 3 years due to vessels being out of action. Will the Scottish Government look to extend and expand the compensation scheme so that all coastal communities and islands can benefit from being out of pocket through no fault of their own?
Cabinet Secretary.
So a number of points in that. I also would want to extend my thanks to the CAMAC staff who, throughout winter periods, are often delivering a service in very, very difficult circumstances. In terms of looking at the technical and in terms of technical cancellations, they are a very small percentage compared to the weather cancellations, which are by far the most substantial. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of vessel journeys. The numbers he's talking about is around about 4%. Now, it does impact on you know, those technical aspect, but remember that's within hundreds of thousands of journeys every year. Now, he may have missed. Now, the other point you raised was the regular 3-monthly reporting of the vessel completions. I was a member of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee. They set the timescale of when this would be. This is always on a quarterly basis, and so the timing has been regular, I think, from when I was on that committee, which was almost 2.5 years ago. So that's a regular drumbeat of reporting, which I think is appropriate and does come from those that are responsible for the delivery of those vessels. And finally, if you can bear with me, Presiding Officer, the reference to support, which is, of course is under the responsibility of Mary Goujon as an Islands Business Resilience Fund of £4.4 million, has been extended. That was announced at the end of last year. That is going to Mull and Isla, Colonsay and Isla, Jura and those communities. That was always the intention if we could extend that funding, but clearly initially it had to be focused on those that had had the most significant disruptions, and that's why the first tranche went to the relevant islands. I'm very pleased the SNP government has taken that seriously and has delivered and is delivering £4.4 million of business resilience to those communities.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. I'll allow a moment or two for front benches to organise before we move on to the next item.